What is up, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome to the Giga Rambles, Friday, February 15th. I'm John Caspian, and today we're joined by Mr. Nick Nanavati, professional 40K player, 40K coach. And Nick, if you can tell us a little bit about yourself and about your coaching service, which we have linked in the description of the video on Facebook, YouTube, etc. Go ahead.
Yeah, sure. So I've been playing 40K for about 15 years now. I'm the 2018 ITC champion, Adepticon 4-time winner, LVO winner, Nova Invitational winner, ETC winner. A lot of winning going on here. And so now I just started to start my own company where I do 40K coaching, list advice, and just general help for 40K. So we've linked that below. I do have two different methods of doing it. One is called Knights Pro Light. It's all through Knights at the Game Table. If you have heard of them, they're a company based on just getting people into 40K, kind of like 40K awareness. So I handle their pro section, which is people who are trying to get into competitive 40K. So I have Knights Pro Light, which is just access to a Facebook group with all my other clients. In there, you can interact with all of them, and you get access to 5 weekly classes I teach. One on general 40K tips, tactics, and strategies. One on Imperial stuff, Chaos stuff, Xeno stuff, and Eldar stuff. That way, if you don't know your other factions too well, like let's say you play with your buddies, your buddy only plays Tyranids, how are you going to know about all these other armies for when you go to tournaments? That's what I'm here to help you with. I also do weekly meta analyses. It's called Meta Monday. So kind of like what I'm going to do for you later on this interview is break down the results of LVL, what's going on in the meta, what a meta is. I do all that every week so you can keep up with tournament info like that. And I do weekly live stream battle reports. I actually did one on Knights at the Game Table yesterday. But basically, instead of just streaming a game like you would if you were to go to frontlinegaming.com or twitch.com/frontlinegamingtv and watch one of their stream games, they're just streaming the game for you. What I do is explain what I'm doing and why I'm doing it, what my opponent's doing and why he's doing it, and what we're not doing but we're considering doing and why we're not doing it. The whole point of that is to coach you guys, is to give you an idea of what's going on in our minds, so that way you can really start to make decisions on your own way. So that's what you get for Knights Pro Light. Knights Pro Coaching is the coaching package, so you get all of that just bundled in there. Plus, you get weekly phone calls with me, unlimited list help. That's about setting goals for you. The best way I can describe it is just like you get a personal trainer for the gym, you're getting a personal trainer for 40K. So if that's something that's interested to you, the links are in the description down below. So go ahead and click those, check those out. Feel free to email me or message me on Facebook. My Facebook name is Nick Brown. I'm happy to talk with any of you guys, answer any of your questions. And yeah, I look forward to working with you all.
Nice. Yeah, it's really cool. I've heard a lot of people who really like that service of yours. So good work on that. Let's jump into LVO. How was your experience there?
Was great. Yeah, I didn't do as well as I would have. Fortunately, I was trying to defend my title from last year. This year, I only managed to go 5-1. I lost in one of the earlier rounds, round 5. I guess if that counts as an earlier round. But I lost the guy who's a really great player. He's from Team England. His name's Alex Harrison. When I say Team England, I mean the English ETC team, which is like the English Olympic 40K team. And he ended up getting second place in the whole event, so it's not like I just lost to some dude. We had a really great game. He brought a pretty good counter to my list, and I only lost by 1 point, so it was a really close game. That's actually the video battle report I did for you guys yesterday on Knights at the Game Table, so feel free to check that out anytime.
Nice. Yeah. Okay. Now, you played as Orcs, right?
I did play with Orcs, yeah.
What was your overall list like?
So it was pretty basic. We had 3 detachments. 2 of them were Evil Sons, and 1 of them was Bad Moons. So it was pretty much all just troops and HQs minus some looters. So I had 2 war bosses. 1 was in mega armor, 1 was on a bike, 3 weird boys, and 1 big mech with a custom force field. Then I had 3 units of 10 Evil Sons Orc boys and 3 units of 28 Evil Sons Orc boys. Then in the Bad Moons, I had like 3 units of like 25 grots, something like that. And then 2 units of Ludas. 1 was 15 and 1 was 7. And then finally I had a unit of 3 Evil Sons Meganobs. Oh,
nice. So really big Horde army.
Huge Horde. It was like 200 something guys.
Man. So how do you move all that at once? Like, is there a technique
to
it?
A lot of it is like movement tricks. I did have some movement deployment. I got those from Tectonic Craft Studios, who were sponsoring me to be at that event. So they make some really cool movement trays. Definitely check those out. But at the end of every round, I put my orcs back on their movement trays. On turn one or during deployment, I just put them on the table. And then because when you play 40K, it's not like it's a skirmish game. So basically, you have to make weird formations with your models at all times. So I ended up taking them off the movement trays, but it really did speed up deployment. But after that, it's a lot of not wasting time doing stupid stuff. If there's inconsequential things like I'm going to throw a stick bomb at this flyer, I'm not going to waste time rolling dice. That's just going to cost me in the long run. So I skip those baby steps and, don't move stuff you don't have to. If your unit is where you want it, or like 90% of your unit is where you want it, but you have to move like 4 or 5 guys to get them where you want them, don't move all 30. So you can, even though there's 200 guys in the army, I was only really using 30 in a turn. And that's pretty much the trick to it.
Interesting. Okay, cool. So in terms of meta-analysis, how do we as an overall thing look at meta? So for those who don't know, meta is basically how people are playing it currently. There is the overall rules. There is how people, how the creators of the game create the armies. But then meta is how the players basically interpret it, and then what players find the strong combinations and whatnot, right? So how do we look and find what is strong in the meta right now?
So a lot of it is reading tournament results, and that's what I do. That's kind of like what my Meta Monday is. And figuring out what people think is popular, what people view as popular, what people think is good, and building around it. And a lot of it, once you understand the game, it all comes from game knowledge. So I can read through the Gene Stealer Cult book, which came out last week, and I can tell you with 90% certainty what units are good and what units bad. Now, of course, there are things that I have yet to discover in that codex, but for the most part, I have a good idea of what's good and what's bad, and that's understanding the math that goes into 40K efficiencies, how this unit will actually perform on the tabletop versus how I envision it performing on the tabletop. And if you can do that for all the different armies, you can start to figure out what units work and what units don't. But then you start to build lists for these armies. Like me personally, I build lists for a living. So I'll write lists out and see how much I can actually fit into a list. Because obviously we've all tried to build lists and end up with 3,000 points instead of 2,000.
Right.
What do I do with that? So if you do that, or you just look at tournament results other people have brought to tournaments, you can see okay, this army with a Catechin Brigade and a Castellan just plays first, third, and fourth at LVO. This army with 7 Eldar Flyers and some scatter bikes plays second. These are strong lists. Then you can look at variations of them. Not those Castellan Guard Brigade lists, they weren't all the same army point for point. Some of them ran Custodia Shield Captains. Some of them ran Admech with I forget what they're called, Dune Striders. And, what's making that list tick? Why does it work? And if you can start to understand those concepts, you can understand what will work in the game, and then you can just start to build no meta out of that.
Interesting. So then what about the Castellan? Because a lot of people always say Castellan is broken, Castellan is OP, or, CP farms are too effective and stuff like that. What about the Castellan in particular makes it so strong in the current meta?
So this is a very controversial topic, so I don't want to approach it as a matter of fact type thing. Yeah. So there's...
But let's say from your perspective, rather than just saying this is how it is, from your experience, and I'm sure you've fought plenty of times. Yeah.
So it's a giant knight, and it's got guns that pretty much pick up whatever they shoot at. The Volcano Lance is D6 shots, AP -5, 3d3 damage. It's in strength 1,000,000. It's going to just, if it shoots a rhino, the rhino's dead. And Call's Wrath, which is the relic that they can take, also pretty much does the same thing. And then, of course, there's a Siegebreaker missile, which just ignores invols and can snipe characters. So that actually, for 600 points, isn't all that powerful. Now, it sounds insane, but when you got to remember is all of its weapons minus 3 CP shield breakers need line of sight. They all bounce off of invulnerable saves if you're shooting something with invulnerable save. And it's fairly random. D6 shots is not 6 shots. D6 shots could be 2 shots. And that's not, there's no reliability to that. What happens is when you combine that with the stratagems from the Nightbook to allow them the Raven strat, which now costs 3 CP, which was a big help. That's from the FAQ from couple months ago. That gives them reroll 1s to hit, to wound, and on damage, which, compounds over time. So if you did whiff on your Call's Wrath plasma shots, let's say you rolled a 1 and a 4, you get to free reroll the 1. It also lets you reroll number of shots, I'm sorry. You reroll the 1, now you rolled it into a 3. That fixes the average for you. Huh. You roll 2 extra 1s to hit instead of, like, you 7 shots, you should roll 1 and miss. Let's say you roll 3 1s because it's a small sample size. Sometimes you get spikes in different directions. If you spike on the low end, the Raven stratagem will fix it. And similarly with wounding and damage and all that, especially for like the D3 damage weapons, like you can reroll your 1s and your 2s because that's how D3s work. So it ends up fixing all of your bad rolls. Then there's like other stratagems, like I forget what it's called, but let's say you bracket the knight down to its lowest tier. For 1 command point, it can act normally. That basically means shooting the knight is completely pointless unless you can straight up kill it. Right. Because you're not making any actual progress on reducing its effectiveness. So for a 28 wound knight, which can get a 2-up armor save and a 3-up invulnerable save, that thing is not easy to hurt at all. So if you hurt it, hoping to reduce how much damage you're going to be taking, and this guy just doesn't care about it, what's the point of even shooting it? So then you ignore it as your strategy, but ignoring a 600-point model that picks up whatever it wants every turn, only a handful of armies can get away with doing that. So it puts you in a lose-lose situation. It's like you have to deal with this thing you can't deal with, and you can't ignore this thing that you have to ignore.
Now, do a lot of armies have something that can take care of it, but you have to like cater your list to it?
So this is kind of where the meta comes into. So if you're following competitive 40k at all, Castellans are the army to like every good army in a tournament has an answer to a Castellan. Now it doesn't mean that they have to kill the Castellan. It just means they have to have an answer to it. There's different ways you can handle problems in 40k, but it all boils down to you either kill it or you ignore it. Right. By ignore it, I mean mitigating its effectiveness. So I'm not going to say that every army has an answer to it, because I think that's just false. But every competitive army has to have an answer to it. So that kind of limits the pool of what is effective. And that's a big issue with the Castellans. Like, I want to run Predators, but I can't because the Castellan goes first and picks 2 of them up turn 1. Right. There's so many units all throughout 40k and even entire armies that just get invalidated because the Castellan exists. This is, of course, only in competitive 40k.
Right. Huh, okay. But, like, now, in terms of, people are saying, how do we fix it? So, like, in your opinion, how would you go about either, I don't know, fixing it or making it less of a FU to all the other, Right. So there's two schools of thought in that. One, it's that it's so bad for the game, let's just remove it from the game. And I'm not saying just, like, take the model, toss in the trash. GW's never going to do that. Right. But, like, if you remember back in the days when they had Maleficent 30 points being spammed all over the place, or that giant Lord of Change Borderworld bird thing that was like 800 points but way too broken. GW came in with a nerf bat and was like, okay, Malefic Lords are going to cost 80 and the giant bird thing is going to cost like 2,000. So you just stop seeing them competitively. Now you could do that with the Castellan. You could make the 600-point Castellan cost 1,200, and that'll effectively remove it from competitive play. Right. Like, it won't say you can't take this model legally. It'll just say there's no point if you're trying to win taking this model. Now, I'm sure some people would be happy with that because no one really is like, I want to play with the Castellan because it's fluffy and fun. I'm sure there's some people, but no one I know. A few people, yeah.
But, no one likes their toys just being invalidated. They spend hundreds of dollars building and painting these models just to be like Games Workshop saying, screw you. That's not very fun. So that's one way of fixing it. Another would be just toning it down. But I don't think a points increase will really tone it down. I think it's one of those models by design, unfortunately, where it's like you either make this thing too expensive to warrant taking it all, or you make it too cheap to the point where it's broken. There's no granularity to its point cost. So you have to look at fixing it in other ways. So like I was saying, for 1 command point, you can make it act normally. And that's kind of insane, considering what value you're receiving on that 1 command point. So just like if you look at the rotate ion shield stratagem that knights have access to, which is effectively +1 to your ion shield invulnerable save, it has a cost of 1 for most knights and 3 for Dominus class knights like the Castellan, like the Valiant. If you apply that same logic to every stratagem in the Knight book, even the ones pregame like making it your Warlord, buying it a relic, etc., That's how I think you should fix it, because the Castellan in it of itself is not a broken model. If you look at those 3 Castellan lists that some people do run, only the one with like all the stuff, that getting all the buffs, is actually broken. The other 2 were Castellans. It's when you can combine all the stratagems, all the warlord traits, all the relics onto one model, it exponentially grows in power. So making it costly to try to make it exponentially grow, like really costly, prohibitively costly, that's when you kind of fix that issue.
Now, going from that and segueing into the Inari, the Inari have, from what I'm aware, it's basically like your epic power casting that you can do. What are the big, I guess, broken things that might be about the Inari?
So Inari is one of those interesting things, very similar to it, and that there's no quick fix to it. For those of you unfamiliar, Soul Burst is basically their main mechanic, and what Soul Burst does is it lets you take extra action. So again, we're in the, like, shooting twice is not twice as good as shooting once. Moving twice is not twice as good as moving twice. I'm sorry, it's like exponentially more powerful.
Right.
To give you an example, like, let's say I'm shooting twice at a Rhino. Yeah, I'm just getting 2 shooting phases at the Rhino, so the Rhino is twice as likely to take damage, or is likely to take twice as much damage. But let's say the first shooting phase is enough to kill the Rhino, troops get out, and now I can't interact with those troops because I've shot my unit. Well, I can shoot twice, now I can shoot all those troops. I get double action economy. So that's a very basic example of it, but that's kind of the idea. Or with moving twice, you can move forward, shoot something, charge something else, and then move backwards at the end of it back to safety. That's a very common tactic players use. So you kind of just dealt 2 blows to your opponent and you didn't trade, you just got free damage out of it. So anyways, Inari has been nerfed over and over and over throughout the years, and it's still not 100% fixed, in my opinion. It's one of those mechanics where I think it's either, at this point, it really just shouldn't exist in the form it does now, but assuming it has to exist in the form it does now, it's either going to be too broken or not good enough to take. There's not really a balance in between.
How would you change it? Like, what would you change it to?
To keep the flavor, to keep the essence of the rule without just straight up crossing it out of the book and just rewriting a new rule in its place and calling it Soul Burst, I would make it so that you can only make the action of your Soul Burst in the phase you're doing it. So by that, I mean the trick I just told you, very common trick, every Inari player does it. They move forward with like shining spears or jet bikes or something very fast and deadly in the movement phase. They shoot something, they charge something else, they kill like 2-3 units because their offense is so great. And typically, if they're not Inari, these units would just be standing in front of the enemy army because they're all very short range. And then at the end of the shooting phase, after they've blown something up, at the end of the assault phase, after they assaulted something, they would just move 22 inches backwards because they can trigger Soul Burst in the shooting or assault phase to move, and they move lightning fast because they're Eldar. So my fix would be you can only Soul Burst move in the movement phase. You could only Soul Burst use the psychic power in the psychic phase. You can only Soul Burst shoot in the shooting phase. And this opens up a whole bunch of lack of options, I guess, which would help tone it down a lot. Because you can't do this hit and run tactic. I can't run in there, fight something in the assault phase, consolidate forward deeper into my opponent's lines, and then start shooting everything up. There's just so many things you take away from the Inari player without just completely crushing their rules.
Nice. Okay. Now
that's my personal fix.
Someone asked, I posted basically in a Facebook group and said, hey, what do you guys want to ask Nick? And then Brandon asks what your plans are for the ITC season.
That's a great question, Brandon. So I have to reclaim my title since I lost it to Brandon Grant this year. I got 3rd place in ITC this past season. So one thing I want to do is also, since it aligns with my business and my goals, I want to try to hit more events worldwide and also domestically. Just reaching more people, coaching more people, getting to know more people, getting to know the community a lot better. That's on my agenda. And to that, one thing that, unless Frontline Gaming changes the the formula at which ITC points are calculated, the only way to really make a shot at winning ITC is to win big events over and I'm not even talking about 70-person majors. That's actually not enough. I'm talking about 120 plus people is the only difference you can make to your score. Going into this LVO, people were like, Nick, you should hit up this RTT that I'm having. This is like a month ago in January. It can help your ITC score right before LVO. And not to be rude, but I was like, unless I could win a 70-person major GT and it wouldn't impact my ITC score. Like, that's how high I got those numbers, because only 5 scores contribute. So obviously going to some little RTT doesn't matter. Going to a GT doesn't even matter. So I need to do well. I basically boil it down to this. I need to go to LVO, Nova, Adepticon, London GT, BAO, SoCal, and if there's any more like super majors, I'm going to create this new classification called super majors. If there's any more of those, I need to hit those up because I need my 5 contributing scores to be those 5 tournaments, or 5 of those tournaments. So I'm allocating some of my business's budget to go into Warhammer tournaments, if that sounds like a misuse of resources. But actually, it's not just to win ITC and to play Warhammer. I'm also trying to reach the community, get to know more people, and just meet more people in general. Hopefully make a difference that way.
Yeah. People, if you have questions for Nick, we're in Facebook Live, so make sure you put it. So Derek says, Deathwatch seems to be making it a lot into Imperium lists. What Imperium factions does Deathwatch match with best?
So Deathwatch do a few things really well. They have a lot of mobility initially, because they deep strike and they teleport. After that, they kind of slow down because then they're just walking in. They obviously handle any not vehicles super well because they pretty much always wound on 2s with a million bolter shots. They have decent AP if they want to, that kind of thing. And they're super hard to get rid of. If you set up your squads properly with like a couple Terminators and a Vet squad, and then give every guy a Storm Shield because Imperium had a discount sale at Home Depot on Storm Shields, you can have a unit with 2-up armor on the Terminator guys to beat all that small arms fire, which everyone who's played Space Marines know 3-up saves might as well be 6-up sometimes. But that 2-up save on a Terminator, that can really make a difference. And then all your regular bolter dudes have Storm Shields, so that way when the last cans start coming for your Terminators, Bob with the Storm Shield gets in the way. So they're really durable units. They're fairly mobile. They're deep strikes. They're pretty much immune to alpha strikes, and they can lay into your opponent early on. Things they struggle with are anti-tank, especially, like I said, Castellans are very much in the meta right now. There's a lot of Knights in general. Wave Serpents are still around. Flyers are now a thing. They struggle with all of that. They don't have any bonuses, like their wound on 2s rounds don't work on vehicles, so they're just bolters against tanks that wound on 5s. That kind of sucks. 6s against Knights. So you need to couple that with some anti-tank. Typically, anti-tank in its most common form in the Imperium, not the old form, is either going to be the Castellan or it's going to be like a classic Smash Captain from Blood Angels or some other Space Marine chapter. Now, Castellans, I'm giving you guys like a novel here. Castellans are a very CP command point intensive unit. As we described, they have all these stratagems, all these they want to use access to. So to fuel a Castellan, you need to give it command points. Also, to fuel Deathwatch attachment to make them all deep strike, you need to give them command points. So if you're combining the two, you have 2 detachments that are very command point hungry. They need command points to work, but don't really give you money command points back. You take a Deathwatch battalion and a Castellan, that's 2 of your detachments, and you have 8 command points. That's not nearly enough. So that's why you don't typically see Deathwatch plus a Castellan. So that's the logic behind it. So you typically see Deathwatch with like Smash Captains and things like that. Also very command point intensive, but you typically can get Smash Captains, their HQs in the Space Marine Army, with like 15 scouts associated with them, and that's a 2nd battalion. So now you have 2 detachments giving you 13 command points. Now the problem with that list in general is like you just have a lack of chaff. Your units are very elite Deathwatch and Smash Captains. So typically you'd fill that up with like a Guard Battalion or a Guard Brigade to give you even more command points, because again, Smash Captains and Deathwatch are very command point intensive. And now you have, like, let's say a Guard Brigade and 2 battalions of Deathwatch and Blood Angels. You have 12, 22, 25 command points. So your army can do whatever it wants. You have tons of chaff from your Guard Brigade, and you have a lot of punching power. So that's a very well balanced of a well written army.
Nice. Wow. Now that was a comprehensive answer. If you weren't taking notes and you play Deathwatch, you got to rewind that after this is done. And,
for sure. So that's the kind of stuff I do in my Knights Pro.
Awesome, man. That is a lot of information. I didn't even think about that kind of thing with the Deathwatch. About, I guess, thinking about command points is one thing. And then what is your if you had one mono codex or monodex, I guess, that you had to take, what would be the most powerful one? Especially the armies that can't take multiple, so Necrons, Tau, Orcs, etc.
I think Orcs are definitely, I think they're top tier, one of the strongest lists you can make right now, even competing with these soup type lists.
And why is that?
They have all the tools you really need. They have a couple of hard counters depending on the form, but mostly they have everything you could want from an army. If there was an army designed for 8th edition before 8th edition even came out, before codexes started dropping, it would have been Orcs. They have lots of aura buffs. They have lots of dudes to hold objectives. They're OPSEC, really good combat ability, fairly quick with jumping and teleporting and all that stuff. Very flexible because they can deep strike now.
But what makes
they are an
Necrons
army
so bad right now?
So Necrons, I think, are an interesting spot. Their army lacks a little. A lot of their units are kind of the same exact unit package. Like a Tomb Blade is an immortal that can fly. It's two immortals glued together that can fly. Those aren't different units. Those are the same unit twice, just a different package. And you get to see that a lot. They don't have, aside from 2 or 3 teleporting tricks or things like that, they don't have much going on as far as flavor goes. And this is unfortunately the same way I feel about demons and a couple other armies. And then pretty much across the board, I think they're still overpriced. They're not as bad as they were pre-chapter approved, but it's a combination of lack of stuff going on in their book. If you look at that book and you look at Genestealer Co., it's how are these two books written to be equals?
Right.
It's not even fair. And then on top of that, they're overpriced across the board. So it's just...
So even with the point reductions from chapter approved, since everything got dropped pretty much, they didn't get dropped enough, I guess.
I would say, and I'm just guessing here, I'm picking... Say Necrons pre-chapter approved were 30% overcosted, and Necrons post-chapter approved are 10 to 15% overcosted.
Gotcha. So what is the strongest thing... let's say not Necrons, but let's say Tau. What is the strongest thing about them as a monocodex?
So Tau's actually another really interesting one. They are an army which you have a really hard time balancing in the rules writing phase from design. Tau obviously don't really do the assault phase and have literally no sections. That's just because of the way they sit in the fluff and the way Games Workshop's designed them. That's what they do. That's their shtick. So since they only move and they only shoot, they have to be so good at moving and shooting that it makes up for the fact that they don't play in 2 phases. But typically that means they either just straight up table you with their guns, or you get to them and they have no backup plans. That was their plan, was hope you don't get to them. So unfortunately, Tau falls into this binary system of this strategy works or it doesn't work. So they're an army that actually is strong enough to compete. If you ever played against Tau, they do shoot that much where it is just, my army's gone. But it's they don't have backup plans, and creating backup plans, fail safes, all that. That's built into a good list design, but Tau don't have an ability to do that. So that's what's holding them back.
Okay. Someone asks, what are your plans for lists for Adepticon? If you want to reveal that now, if you don't, that's fine.
Yeah, sure. So I just actually had read their Adepticon missions that just came out. I was on pause for a while because I'm 100% in LVO mode, didn't touch Adepticon. LVO ended. I read them earlier this week. And one of the things that strikes me as really effective for Adepticon is going to be board control. All their missions are progressive objective scoring, so you have to hold objectives in the middle of at the end of your turns, or at the start of your next turn, which means your opponent has a chance to knock you off. But anyway, it's progressive scoring. And there's a killing units component, but it's not based on ITC. It's not like you get 1 point if you kill a unit and you get another point if you killed more units than your opponent this round. It's just you count up how many points died at the end of the game, and that's your score. So In ITC, it really punishes an MSU approach, multiple small of like 20, 30 different units, because you would basically be handing your opponent the bonus point for killing more objectives every turn, and you'd be simultaneously never really be getting it yourself. It's like a double whammy. In Adepticon, that's not a concept. So I think a Horde-style board control list will function really well with the progressive mission, and then an MSU army will function really well at the killing portion. So right now, my two leading ideas are going to be just revamp my Orc army, because my Orc army is very much designed for an ITC format right now. And maybe just rewrite it a little bit more MSU-y and a little more janky for Adepticon missions. Or just start from scratch with a Gene Stealer cult army, because I think they're a very MSU army that love to brigade, so they get to make use of that killing portion of it. And it's an assault deep striking army that screams board control. So one of those two. I don't own a Gene Stealer cult army, so right now I guess Orcs are my number, but we'll see.
Nice. Thomas asks, what are the Primaris missing in order to be competitive if they're the main part of an Astartes list?
That's a really interesting question. So I guess one thing that they really struggle with, and they are doing a lot more to fix this as time goes on, is that their offense has just always sucked. Like, who cares if you're getting shot by a bolter or a 2-shot bolter or an AP-1 bolter? It just doesn't do anything. Like, 18 points or whatever they are, I think they're 18 now, for a 3 to hit, 3 to wound, guardsman takes a dead guardsman type of thing, just isn't competitive. Like, if you look at the lists that are strong, they're either so much junk it doesn't matter. Like, paying to kill junk, paying a premium to kill junk just doesn't matter. By junk, I mean like Orc Boys, Chaos Cultists, Imperial Guardsmen. That's the epitome of an efficient model as far as I exist, I occupy space, I am a model that does something, and I cost like 4 points. A Space Marine's like, I exist, I occupy space, I kill one cultist, woohoo, and I cost 18 points. That's pretty useless. So with the bolter rule, there are steps to fix it, but, baby steps. It's going to take a while to walk a mile. That's my point.
Because we saw from the box that they have preview that there's snipers, there's a couple of unrevealed types. What would you like to see from that box set?
To be honest, I haven't really looked at it. I really would like... It's hard because you don't want to just make them too powerful.
Right.
More efficient guns, because then you get power. That's a whole thing. I think a combination of simultaneous point reductions in Primaris Marines, plus like a slightly better, maybe a 2-shotgun, could be really... That could be all they need. They're getting closer. They are. I would also like to see the floor of the game raised. So it's not so much a problem with the Primaris Marine at a certain point. It's a problem with everything else in the game. Like, if you want... Like, Games Workshop clearly wants to make Space Marines the standard for 40K. But what they're doing is they're not... Asking this question is not working towards that goal. If you want to make Primaris Marines a standard, that's fine. You don't fix the Primaris Marine until it becomes the standard. You fix the rest of the game around the standard.
Gotcha. So it's not really a matter about making them more powerful or nerfing them or anything. Makes sense. Okay. So then
it's just it's like reverse it now. It's a lot more work to fix everything around the game.
Right. So then, like, stratagem-wise, they don't really have anything that's super powerful.
Yeah, you can see in the way the game has evolved. If you look at the first couple of codexes that came out, barring Chaos Space Marines, if you look at Grey Knights, Space Marines, even Imperial Guard, those codexes have terrible stratagems. Like, not terrible, like this is just, there's no stratagems here. It's just there's a lot of like one command point, this is kind of key, and I might use this kind of stratagem. Whereas if you look at the newer codexes, Orcs, Gene Stealer Cult, I forget what came out before that, but Orcs and Gene Stealer Cult, the most recent two, they have huge stratagems all over the place. 2 command points, 3 command points that make game-changing results. Like, Space Marines have like 1 command point fire, 5 Savers, Immortal. Orcs are like, we're going to use a never-ending Green Tide, and Green Sword Cults, we're going to show up next to you on your doorstep with a gun that shoots 25 times. These are... Clearly, Games Workshop has changed what they want stratagems to do throughout history. In the beginning, they were like, let's just augment these units. And then towards the end, they were like, let's make this thing insane. And it's like, that's fine. It's actually not broken. It's just the problem is there's these guys having super powerful, crazy, awesome stratagems, and then Space Marines are like, here's my Hellfire shell. Like, night and day.
Right. Now, from your perspective, is there any way in the long term that you can properly balance the meta? Because we have, what, 16, 17 different factions, plus whatever they might bring out in the future, including the soups, you know, since we have to include, they're not going to get rid of those. How do you balance all these things long term?
Yeah, so
if you can,
you're never going to get the game to be 100% balanced where every faction is viable and has an equal 1% rate. I don't think you could design a computer without even taking in human emotions that could physically do that. This is just not a possible thing to do. There's too much stuff going on in the game. But the game is more balanced than it's ever been. If you look at LVO, which is the largest sample size from any single event in 40K history, we have the variety list, maybe not the variety in top 8, but the variety of lists that people attempted to bring that thought were viable was just the highest it's ever been. The most factions represented, no faction really represented more than 10% of the field. It was wonderful. Great time to be a 40K player. And baby steps will actually get you pretty far. Like, if you just take the Castellan down a peg or 5 pegs or whatever, then it opens up a whole new possibility for all the things that the Castellan invalidated. Similarly, this Eldar plane list that got second place, for whatever reason, I don't know why people aren't talking about that more, because that's also very non-interactive stuff. If you knock that down a peg or two, then you have all those things that you can't bring competitive because these two things exist can now start to be played. You can start seeing weird stuff like Vindicators and Predators and all kinds of things on the table, and you won't get laughed off by a Castellan for shooting you. So small tweaks magnified over 16 different codexes could create a huge shift in the metagame. And that's just like basic principles of science.
Okay, let's go to a couple of questions that we have in the comments here. Mark has a question on chapter tactics or craft world traits. Should getting the better traits cost you command points, the same way Vigilus detachments work? So BL10 would cost less than, I can't pronounce it, Alitok? Right. Evil Sons more than Goths, etc. Yeah,
that's a really interesting idea and question. So that's not a bad fix for it, actually. It's not one I had considered, so I think that's a fine fix. One thing I like with the way Games Workshop has been designing armies, and they haven't done it consistently, but sometimes they do get it right. Typically, you'll find a really good warlord trait. Like, I'll give you an example from Orcs. There's a great warlord trait. I think it's cunning but brutal. Lets you redeploy D3 Orc units. The issue with that is that it's, in brackets, clan Orc units. So if you want your warlord to be one clan, and you want your army to be another clan, he can't really redeploy anything useful. Now, this sounds like not really a problem, but trust me, what you want to do is you want to redeploy your Ludas, and your Ludas want to be bad moons, but you want your war boss to be evil. That way he affects your evil son stuff with his advancing and charging, his morale, and all those types of things. So that's an interesting way of doing it. Now you can apply that across like stratagems. So every clan or craft world, chapter, whatever, has a trait, or a stratagem rather, specific to that chapter. So if you can make a really powerful stratagem on a really bad chapter trait, that's kind of an interesting way to balance it. Similarly, you can get a really good relic if you take a bad chapter. So it's when you start to see problems like the best chapter has the best stratagem, has the best relic, has the best warlord trait, that just makes that one the obvious choice.
Right, and there's no reason to take anything else.
There's no reason to take anything else. But, you know, there's 4 reasons to take a chapter, or a chapter in general. There's the trait it gives you, there's the relic, there's the warlord trait, there's the stratagem. So there's 4 different points you can balance. Now, obviously, the trait is going to be the most widespread and effective, and these 3 are going to be very small, but that doesn't mean you can't find some sort of balancing act.
That's an interesting thing. Well, thanks for bringing that up. Was it Nick?
It's a great question.
Mark brought that up. Someone asked if you play anything besides, do you play like board games, out of the box board games? Yeah,
so this is the only game I play competitively.
Right.
Lunatic has to master everything. I do enjoy board games a lot. I don't have like a board game collection because I have no one to play with. Some of my friends play board games and like they're lunatics and have like 100 board games. Right. So I'll go over their house, we'll play some games, whatever. I used to play War Machine like 5-6 years ago. I got into that, but basically I had to, at that point I was in college, so I was like, college, War Machine, Warhammer, pick 2. So, you know, cut War Machine.
Nice.
And
someone asks about the future of Dark Eldar, soup or no soup.
You don't have to soup a Dark Eldar army to be successful, but I think an army that soups a Dark Eldar army with a little bit of is probably going to be stronger than one that doesn't.
Okay.
But I've run pure Dark Eldar armies to success before.
Interesting. Nice. Okay, let's see. We think we have some other questions. Oh, in terms of GW FAQing stuff, like I think you talked a little bit about it, small adjustments at a time, but what should be, do you think, their next step in terms of FAQing the current meta?
So that's a good question. Like I said, the Castellan something. I think this just in general, I don't think you should bring more than 3. That would really bring down.
Repeat that part. Your mic cut out just a little bit.
Yeah, I think you shouldn't be allowed to bring more than 3 flyers in total. Okay. There's a 7 flyer army I keep going on about. Very non-interactive, and while obviously Rule of 3 does a lot to fix it, he just bought 3 Razor Wings, 3 Crimson Hunters, and a Hemlock. And there's a more extreme one that placed really well in England recently, which was 10 flyers. It was 3 Crimson Hunters, 3 Void Ravens, 3 Razor Wings, and 1 Hemlock. And it's not really the way that I feel, and I assume Games Workshop feels played. So a small fix to just 3 max would do a lot for that. Then there's like little stuff. Like I would like to see the floor of the game, the points floor increase. Cultists, Grots, all those super cheap models just go up a point or 2 and bring the expensive, like the things that are just overcosted, down a point or 2. And now we have a much more even playing field, I feel.
Nice. Okay. Yeah, so I know they said, I think they said chapter approved is when they would do a lot of big points adjustments, but...
Yeah, so those points adjustments are just wish listing for until...
Yeah, that'll have to wait a little while, but... Yeah. Overall. And then in terms of stratagems, would you change any particular stratagems? I know you talked a little bit about some of them, like the Castellan ones.
Yeah, so I think for all the night ones, to the Castellan, instead of making it cost... Because like I said earlier, it's either going to be too good or not good enough. And I don't want people who have Castellans to be like, what do I do? I want the game to be balanced, which means there should be Castellans. There just shouldn't be a million Castellans, and there shouldn't be a press. What I was trying to say is, like, make 2 costs for all the stratagems in the night book. They already have introduced this concept, so this isn't my idea that I'm just throwing out of left field. Just like the Ion Shield, 1 command point for 3 command points for a Dominus class. Act normally, 1 command point for regular knight, 3 command points for Dominus class, etc. through all of them. And that's, because you're amplifying the same effect to a much more powerful unit. So it should be more costly.
Nice. Lamb asks, what about the beta bolter rule? Does that increase the Marines' viability at all?
For sure. I don't think it does too much to like the regular basic tactical. It kind of helps the Primaris Marine a little bit, but not as much. Bikes, though,
real quick. I think if you're hitting your table, it might be cutting out your mic a little bit.
That could be it.
My Discord has a little noise suppression thing, so
yeah. Sorry about that.
Yeah, no problem. No problem. I think that might be it.
But anyways, yeah, I don't think it helps tactical Marines or even too much, but I think basic stuff like Terminators and bikes, believe it or not, will see the most benefit to it. I think actually an incidental thing. This is some stuff that people pay for. I'm just going to give you guys for free. Deathwing Knights, or not Knights, Deathwing Terminators. They got just basic Stormbolter Terminators from Deathwing. With their Deep Strike and Shoot stratagem, now that they don't get screened out of rapid fire as easily, because you can screen 24 inches now instead of just 12, you can really just put 80 shots into something when you come down. That's incredibly powerful. It just is. One of the easy tips and tricks I can give you for screening out normal deep strike units, like let's say a rapid fire is 12 inches, if you have your unit that you care about here, and then you put something crappy you don't care about screen 3 inches in front of it right there, and then the guy has to deep strike 9 inches away from your screen, he's not within 12 inches of your unit back here, so he can't rapid fire on you. With that new bolter rule, you have to have your unit here and your new unit fit your screen unit 15 inches out. That's mostly unrealistic.
Right.
So,
it's a big difference.
You're just getting shot.
Right.
So that's why, you might see some Deathwing Terminator hit the table, which is pretty interesting. There's some other units like that.
Huh. William asks, what race from the lore would you like to see get their own army? And how would they play?
That's an interesting question.
I know, right? Squats.
Crew. I love crew. I think crew are like the coolest freaking
Their own army, huh?
Like I want a crew army. I would run that so hard. I wish crew were a thing.
Okay, cool. Crute. They kind of people have talked about having a mini dex for them or something like that. Like,
well, they used to have rules in like
dex.
4th. It was like a mini dex, but they just were like, "No, this is stupid."
Derek asks, once the codexes are out for Sisters, what do you think will be next for 8th edition besides just FAQs and chapter approved?
Well, there's a couple directions they can go for it. They could start redoing codexes, like all the initial Space Marines, Death Guard. All those guys could use a revamp, or we could start introducing new things. Excuse me. Which I actually hope they don't do. I'd rather them not start throwing in even more Vigilist detachments, even more formations, those kinds of things. Because then we get game bloat, kind of like we had in 7th.
Right.
Or they could head towards 9th edition, which I've heard is... I don't really know like what stage they're in, but I've heard it's on the table of discussion. Okay. So at some point we are looking at a 9th. But yeah, those are the 3 things that I could foresee.
8.1, it would still be an effectively in 9th edition?
Yeah, something like that.
Someone says something, I think that is in Cyrillic, which I cannot read. So if someone can read that from Demetrius, that'd be great. Which unit would you love to use, but can't because it's just not good enough?
Fate Weaver. He's like my favorite model in all of 40K. 4th edition, or like 5th edition to 7th edition. And then they just made him so bad in 8th. And I want to cry about it.
Yeah, we were getting some questions in either Russian or another Cyrillic. I cannot read that.
Could you just pop it into like Google and translate it?
I could, but I can't. Not with my app here. So Justin asks, what about knights not having access to stratagems when you only bring 1?
That would be a really interesting fix. I could see that. Like, they're the only auxiliary choice, I believe, that unlocks stratagems as just Nox choice. So I don't know why that's the case. I guess it's so people who want to run like just a Gallant or something can run a Gallant and it's not terrible. But it also has the consequences, obviously, Castellan just destroying everyone. But that's always been a question in the back of my mind.
Yeah, and Jason actually asks, if Castellan goes away as a meta choice, does Gallant take over?
You may see more Gallants, but you won't see Gallants being oppressive like a Castellan's oppressive. They're not.
Gotcha.
They're useful. They're good. They're tools.
Right.
But it's not 600 points of pick up this model from across the table, pick up that model from across the table. It's like you have to use a Gallant. You have to interact with the Gallant to use the Gallant. You have to run a Gallant.
Stephanos asks about the Inari and the broken and overuse combo, blah blah. But we talked about that earlier, Stephanos. So you'll have to watch the replay on that one because we went into detail about the Inari and how they work, and then how Nick suggests to fix them. And then Ricky, Kia, our Giga champion for Gigabytes Cafe for skirmish games, asks, have you tried Kill Team yet?
I played it one time.
Okay.
Me and my buddy Tony Kopak, we played Kill Team at his house once. It was fun. I enjoyed it. I would play it again, but at the same time, I don't have time to like just invest my time learning different games. So that's pretty much my answer there.
Nice. Okay. And then final thing, if you could tell us again about your coaching service, since this, unless you have anything else you want to talk about in terms of meta.
No, that's pretty much it.
You guys covered quite a bit in that almost an hour-long interview.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, if you can tell us about your coaching and then where people can find you. We also have a link in description as well for YouTube, Facebook, and all that, so you can find the website. So yeah, go ahead.
I am a professional 40K coach / player. I offer coaching services through Knights at the Game Table. Hopefully you guys have heard of them. You can search them on Facebook if you haven't, or YouTube. They have tons of YouTube videos. Anyways, there's 2 different services I offer. One is called Knights Pro Lite, and one is called Knights Pro Coaching. For the Lite version, I teach 5 classes per week, 1 on Imperial stuff, Chaos stuff, Xeno stuff, Eldari stuff, and general 40K tips, tricks, and strategies. So if you're not familiar with your armies or you learn about other people's armies more in depth, I'm happy to help you there. You can ask me specific questions, and I do answer them in live Facebook live form. Additionally, I do a weekly Meta Monday where I review past week's tournament results like LVO that just happened. Genes to Occult just released, so I go over new releases too, and I read the books, go over the tournament results myself, and then I translate that into data for you guys. Hey, this is what you can expect to see at the next tournament you go to. And then I do weekly live stream battle reports where I don't just stream the game like it's a tournament, like me versus my opponent. I stream it and I explain, I pause, I take minutes to describe what's going on, what I'm thinking, like why I'm moving my models here this way, why I'm doing this. I zoom in and stuff. And I really want to give you guys the full picture of what's going on in my brain and my opponent's brain. That way you can learn how to think about the game in your own way in a really helpful and constructive manner. That's Knights Pro Lite. That's $37 a month. There's a link to that below. And then there's Knights Pro Coaching for $97 a month, which gets you all of that. Plus, it gets you unlimited list help and gets you a weekly call with me to go over your games, your strategies, answer any questions you have, more one-on-one personal in-depth help. I've seen a lot of people get really good success off that. I know one of my clients was going like consistently 3-3, 4-2 at tournaments. He was a decent player. He has won 5 GTs in the past 4 months over in Seattle. So the results speak for themselves. I've heard a lot of success stories. So yeah, if that's something you're interested in, if you're interested in upping your game, and you don't even have to be a 3-3, 4-2 player. You don't even have to be someone who's gone to a who are just like, Nick, I want to go to tournaments, but I don't know what I'm doing. And I can take you from any level of skill to as far as you're willing to go.
Awesome.
So if you're interested in that stuff, check out the links below. Yeah.
Cool. And then I'll also put it in the comments there in the Facebook thing as soon as we're done here. I can't access it right now with the streaming going on, but I'll put that link there in the comments for anyone interested. So Nick, thank you so much for joining us. We're going to shoot back over to Gigabytes with John and Mark. We're going to talk a little bit about the other stuff in LVO, like the War Machine and Horde stuff. But Nick, thank you so much for joining me today. Appreciate you, man.
Yep. Thanks for having me, John.
Bye.
My pleasure.
What's up, guys? Mark, John.
Oh, hey.
That's the one. Hey, can you hear me?
No, yeah, no, we can hear you. Can you hear a question?
Awesome. Yes. You're a little on the quiet side, but I think we're good.
That's fine. All right, so we're here to do a quick recap of LVO. Our time is short, so we have just a little bit to go over that, and then we also have all of this week's new releases that we want to talk about, and then we'll kind of briefly touch about the reveals of Toy Fair, plus Vigilus and the Shadow Spear box set. But first, there's a David in the background. Can I move? Oh, there he is. Oh, look at David. So if you hear an Irishman in the back, that's David, not another. All right, so going over War Machine LVO, similar to how there was a bunch of Castellans and the Knights present with the Inari, like making an overall majority. The War Machine Hordes, at least at LVO, had a very similar kind of response or issue. So of the top 8 teams represented in the LVO, there was 3 Scorn and 3 Circle of Orboros. So that means out of the 8 teams, there's only 4 factions present of the 14, I believe, available in the game currently. And a lot of that comes from a couple of different things. Mark, if you wanted to touch on that.
Yeah, so a lot of times there's just the new Hotness, and a lot of people want to play that.
Right. And Scorn and Circle were the most recent releases for War Machine and Hordes. They're the ones that got the updates.
And also, it throws as a curveball into the meta, where people want to play it, so it's prevalent, but there has not yet been countermeasures in all the other factions, like developed, I guess is the best way. So the thing of it is like, your immune system trying to fight off a new invader. Like, you don't know how to fight it yet.
Yeah.
But you just got to give it time.
And so that's one of the things, or one of the issues that we've seen happening a lot in the War Machine and Hordes meta, where whatever the new faction is, you have probably a 3 to 6 month period after the rules and models get released of it kind of being hyper prevalent in the scene,
just running rampant.
Yeah, and that can gauge all the way from just seeing it being a majority of the faction represented to kind of clouding the top 8 or top 4, top 3, whatever you want to do your metrics by. Now, this is a tricky subject for people looking at the game and people developing the game. Because game developers, and this can be applied to Warhammer 40k, Age of Sigmar, whatever, they're going to look at it and they're going to be like, well, there's not enough data here to make any solid conclusions.
But people will always jump to those.
Exactly. And that's the thing, is that their customer base, their player base are going to say, well, if there's only 4 factions in the top 8, isn't there an issue with the game? And the developers,
we'll just say maybe we have to wait.
Yeah, and that's not the response you want to hear, right? You don't want to always see like, why can't I be in the top 8? It's clearly because my faction isn't good. And the developers are like, maybe you're just bad, and they can't say that.
Well, the big thing is you don't have data like you do. Like if you think of StarCraft and StarCraft 2, they just crunch data, right? So then they can say, this unit is doing a lot better statistically. It's harder to do that with board games and tabletop games.
And so getting more people playing the game actually helps balance, right? Because you're seeing more of those stats, more of those numbers. You're getting more reports across the country from different places, different player groups, and things are doing well. Because I brought up Captain Con as well. Captain Con was a tournament taking place at the same time as LVO, just in a different area. Okay. And its top 8 was much more diverse than LVO. So, and looking at the players, there's a lot of the players that I see that travel and do the national meta. Like Jake Van Meter was at Captain Con. He placed 3rd. Charles Soong was playing Mercs, and he was 1st place at Captain Con. And then there's also people like Mike Purier and all these other kind of high-level people. And if you combine all the people that you see on a regular base, the diversity in the lists is a lot broader than what the initial results would think. But once again, for an outside player or someone who is not as deeply involved in the national community or like the tournament circuit, you're just going to be like, wow, that looks broken.
And also LVO, as far as someone who's unfamiliar with some games, will draw a lot more attention than Captain Con.
Exactly. Yeah. So
you see that big name and you're like, wow. This.
Yeah. And Kai also says it could just be it's also players sometimes. Like if you have the same players who have different lists every year, it could also be that factor as well.
Yeah, and that's a big thing too. Like, and Mark kind of touched on the new Hotness, where a lot of these guys are people who travel year-round participating in tournaments, and they play enough to where they want different experiences. So whenever something new comes out, they're going to be like, "All right, cool. I'm gonna play that for a bit because that's exciting." And they are already a skilled player that is able to take advantage of a lot of the factions' offerings. So.
A lot of the players that you see that, like the ones at Captain Con, where there's a lot more diversity, these are the players that travel. You see that these players will travel to experience new metas. Yeah. And they will quickly adjust. So when I made the immune system comparison, they're the ones that have the immune system that will adapt extremely quickly to new metas. And all of a sudden you have a list where the 2 top lists get crushed by these people because they see the strengths, they see the weaknesses in both their army and their opponents. And then it's like, bam, like I know how to fix or patch these holes that I was experiencing before. And, obviously you have to sacrifice something to adjust to the meta. Like they might not be able to handle lists that were so easy for them before, but it's a pick and choose thing. And the neat thing about these tournaments also is that there's a list chicken. You'll have 2 lists that you can bring to every single match. And,
that's the War Machine Horde thing, right?
Yeah. And it's a really great offering overall, just because, hey, it allows you to build lists a little bit more creatively, do things a little bit differently than necessarily 40K, where 40K you need to prepare for almost an all-comers thing. With the 2-list system, you don't necessarily have to do that. But we are getting people lining up at the door, so we're going to run through this week's releases, and we're going to be making a post later on about the Toy Fair reveals made today. So
one of the things I'm excited to share with a friend,
Carrion Empire.
So cool looking.
So Carrion Empire releases this Saturday. It's really exciting. It contains a new model for both the Flesh Eater Courts and Skaven. But even probably more exciting than the new models is the consolidated rules and updated rules for both the Flesh Eater Courts and the Skaven. No longer are the Skaven going to be divided into 5 different houses that have to be played individually. You can now group them all together or experience the expanded rules for each one of the Grand Skaven clans.
And on top of that,
Flesh Eater Courts received a lot of new rules and benefits, and they really kind of pushed that Grand Delusion mechanic where they believe they themselves are defenders of the realms.
Welcome back to Bretonnia, everyone.
Yeah, exactly. So if you guys are looking for Bretonians, it's Flesh Eater Courts.
You have the Carnal Throne. Which is your hero to sit on.
Carnal Throne makes summoning and reinforcements a lot easier, and it also improves the morale of your guys.
Who would not want to congregate below the mighty king on his throne.
Exactly. And then there's the new endless spells.
You have the Holy Grail that Bretonia sought. You have the horses, which you can't see, but they're in the spear formation.
Yep.
That Bretonia was famous for. So you see in the top, they're doing the formation that they were famous for.
Yep.
Yeah,
And then
you see the fleur de lis
Yep.
on the
blockade.
yeah.
And actually, so for endless spells, the Flesh Eater Courts, for those who want to try out endless spells, the Flesh Eater box is actually one of the most well-designed endless spells. Each one does something wildly different, but also very impactful. The Grizzly Blockade actually prevents charges. Like, you know, it's a wall. It'll stop your opponent from charging a flank.
And it cuts their movement in half.
Exactly.
For being, near it.
Oh,
And
nice.
the Chalice improves your hero. And then what are the horses called? Is it
It's the Corpse Mare Stampede.
Corpse Mare Stampede. I wanted to say Stampede, but it seemed wrong with horses. But basically, that's a cool predatory spell, and it fits very fluffy in there.
So what it does is it is good at hurting high model count units.
Yeah.
So it just you roll dice, and if you roll equal to the wound characteristic of what you're stampeding over, you cause a wound. So obviously, if it's one wound model, you're going to be doing a lot of wounds.
Yeah.
But then we have the Skaven stuff, which I have done less reading up on because I'm a Flesh Eater Courts player. Once
again, the Skaven endless spells are really useful and they're a lot of fun. The Warp Lightning Vortex, you actually take more damage the more Warp Lightning Vortexes you're in, so you have to like triangulate it, which is a lot of fun. You know, the Vermintide is a good predatory spell.
And video game.
Yeah. And then the Bell of Doom, once again.
Because you have to have a bell.
Yeah.
As a Skaven player, it's a must.
And finally, this is huge for Skaven players, the Gnawholes. And
That's so cool.
In the fluff, they talked a lot about how the Skaven moved about the realms and how these Gnawholes have been present. Basically, the Skaven are able to more or less burrow through the stuff, the immaterium between realms, and that's where they kind of find their home and pop in from other realms here and there.
It's been said that they even brag that they have one that leads to Sigmar's throne room.
Yeah, and so it's a very Skaven thing, but it's a great mechanic that lets you redeploy your Skaven very easily, and it's just going to be a great looking terrain piece to have on the board. And this is one of those terrain pieces that I love because you can explain it on any board.
Yeah.
Like, it's not like some weird, like let's say the Loon Shrine, which is this monolith structure.
How did they get there?
Yeah, exactly, right? But like the Gnawholes make sense. And so it's definitely cool. Check out these new releases. They all drop this Saturday. We are still taking pre-orders. A lot of people are splitting boxes, so get hyped about that. And then we also have the final wave of Genestealer cults, if you wanted to grab those.
Yeah.
So this one is going to focus more on the Aberrants, featuring the Biologist.
Biophis or
Biophages.
Yeah,
Biophages. Biophages, the Abominant, the Aberrants.
Comes with a little extra guy.
Yep.
So for those of you watching, this guy is a model I have yet to figure out a replacement for my version of the Genestealer cult. So obviously here's the unit that he helps.
It's
Those I want to
Goliaths,
replace.
probably.
Yeah, well that's what I'm going to replace these guys with is the Goliath gang members. But I don't know what to replace the big guy with. I was looking for like an Ogre-esque model, perhaps.
Yeah.
So I've seen the bikes and the ATVs and stuff in person, and it looks really cool. Seeing them all on the board.
Mark's got those guys mostly built up. They're just missing the head swaps.
Yep, I still got to do the head swaps on the bikes. But
You said you're doing it Mad Max style?
Of course.
So great. So great. It's perfect.
Yeah.
All right,
well,
buddy.
guys, we are about at the 12 o'clock mark, and we need to get going. But thank you very much for tuning in.
Yep.
Thank you for Nick for being a guest speaker with us. We really appreciate it.
So Skaven dice.
Oh, yeah. Limited edition dice. They're really cool.
And they're easy to read.
Yes, and they're easy to read. So check them out while we got them. But yeah, until next time, enjoy your gaming.
Yeah.
We'll see you next week.
Yeah, have a wonderful weekend, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Yeah.